Hello and welcome back to the Ideas Pod. Now, if you're sort of the person who watches news, I'm sure you've heard about the Global South. These are mainly countries in Asia, Africa, and the American continent, who have a lot of things in common basically. Maybe they have a shared colonial past, maybe they have a shared economic trajectory, and maybe common economic aspirations. And right now, there is a scramble to engage with these countries and to court their support. But what does the Global South want for themselves? Who is charting their future? Let's try to answer these questions on this panel, and let me introduce the guests first. Arzu Rana Deuba is the Foreign Minister of Nepal. Welcome, ma'am. And Julia Ganter is the Program Director at Körber-Stiftung. Welcome to both of you to the Ideas Pod. Let me start with you, Minister. I know it's very tempting to look at the Global South as a unified political bloc. But the fact is, when you get down to it, some people say there are 70 countries in the Global South. Some people say there are 130 countries in the Global South. So with this lack of clarity, do you think the Global South is closer to being a concept than an active political player right now?
Well, I think it is a concept for now, but I hope we get to become an active political player, especially in the current context where a lot of what we had taken for granted as, aid programs, loans, may be getting, they may be getting more squished. So we will have to come together, really define ourselves, and also define what it is that we really want in order to be able to even exist. I was in a panel before this, and for some of us now, it's already an existential crisis. So it's no longer a romantic idea that we can spend time on. It has to become a real group of people who speak a common language.
Julia, looking at it from the West, from Germany, for example, what do you think about the Global South? Is it a product of our times? Is it here to stay? Or is it just a passing fad?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. And I must say that what equips me to answer your question is that my institution, the Körber Foundation, is doing research with 3 fantastic think tanks in Brazil, South Africa, and India. And based on this research, we have reached out to many experts and policymakers in the past 2 years and have conducted some surveys on exactly these questions. And I would say that the Global South and the rise of the Global South is something that we are seeing for quite a while now. Nevertheless, I would say from a German perspective in that sense, it has come to our mental maps rather recently, but I think there's no doubt about the fact that it is here to stay. And I agree that it's a very diverse concept, of course. However, I would say that there are some common denominators that we can see in our research that unites different countries from the Global South. For example, joint challenges. We can see in our research that experts from India, Brazil, and South Africa, they're naming international trade as something that they really want to tackle and see as a challenge. So I think despite the fact that it is a concept, they have some joint actions that it is worth for being united as a Global South, despite having the differences.
When you look at the Global South in opposition to the West, for instance, what stands out is the sheer number of countries in it. And they're all big, they're all diverse, they have their own national interests. So how do you bring such a large number of countries together, make them sit at the table, and then speak in one voice? Where does that unity come from in the Global South?
I think one of the key areas now for us is our concern with public debt. We have I was reading in the literature that the Global South has average of 60% GDP is now public debt. And added to that is the burden that is caused by climate, by incidents caused by climate change. So how do we pay the loan back is one big issue for us. And already, World Bank shows that we've paid back more than $1.3 trillion, money that we could have used for betterment of our people, for really advancing or responding to climate challenges. So all these kind of things will bring us together, I think. And one of the common denominators for us is this huge debt that we owe. And then the debt is repayment of the debt is a very big challenge for us. And that is a unifying factor also.
The rise of the global south in many ways coincides with the decline of the Western order, or at least the erosion of the sort of dominance that they used to have. So if I were to ask you hypothetically, what could the global south learn from the mistakes that were made by the global north or the Western countries as they went about shaping the world?
First of all, I must apologize because I don't really agree with this kind of framing. From my perspective, it's not that in the past 80 years only countries that we would count among the West have shaped the international order, right? Thinking about the fact that there were mistakes made, okay, we can take that. But I think it was not exclusively a Western development. We can see, for example, despite the fact that IMF and World Bank, they have huge need for reform, there was some movement within these institutions with regards to quotas and so on. So I think that first of all, it takes kind of the agency from the global south if we just look at it that way. But I don't want to escape your question. So I think that something that we could consider as our mistake is, first of all, that growth was not inclusive enough. Cooperation was not beneficial for all sides involved. And also what we are learning in Europe for the past 3 years specifically is that it's not a good idea to be too dependent on one country. And I think the concept of multi-alignment is not something that the Global South needs to learn from us, but we rather need to learn from the Global South in this current moment where we woke up in a world that is not as transatlantic anymore for us in Europe than it was before.
Yeah. Now, if you look at any political organization, and I don't just mean the Global South, historically any organization, they tend to thrive when there's a clear leadership, when everybody knows who's calling the shots and who speaks for you. Do you see this sort of a leader emerging in the Global South? Because I know that China and India have both staked claim to that leadership position. How does a country like Nepal, for example, look at this leadership tussle within the Global South?
Well, for Nepal, it's a balancing act, and our very location is between China and India. It's one of the most strategic locations in the world, but also a very geopolitically sensitive place. And the leadership of China and India both on the global stage seem to be, going at their own pace. India is leading in some issues, China is leading on some issues. So for countries like Nepal, it's trying to balance and also to see where the alignment best fits so that Nepal as a nation can progress. So for this, like I was in this session just now on a Marshall Plan on climate action. Maybe India has the capacity to convene these kind of huge forums and discuss all these issues in a very open way, in a very democratic way. So it would be opportune, moment for India to perhaps take on the mantle of something like this. And maybe China will do something else, which may also benefit a lot of nations from the Global South. So I think it's not really, one nation for every issue. I think there will be leadership on different issues of different emerging big countries from the Global South.
In the last couple of years, like I mentioned in the introduction, there is a scramble to court the Global South countries, so to say. We saw that at the G20 summit in New Delhi, where the African Union finally found a permanent place at the G20. What do you think has led to this acknowledgement by the rest of the world that, hey, this is a group that we need to engage with and that we need to keep on our side? What is that? Is it just economic power? What's happening?
I think it's a championship from different countries. We specifically in our research call them the emerging middle powers who take on some specific responsibility. And I don't think that it's only because of economic power. And South Africa, for example, is a great example for that. They are very vocal on the international stage, calling out our international rules and norms very vocally. And I think that's also a way how you can raise the awareness in Western countries.
Right. Let's also talk about long-term goals now. And I know this is something both of you are interested in. What is the long-term goal of the Global South, which is exactly what our topic is about? Is it about creating a new world order, a completely different one? Or is it about making reforms wherever necessary in the existing world to make it a better place for everyone? Minister, you first.
I think it's a bit of both. There might be some new issues where the emerging countries of the global south may have a better handle on, and maybe, in those areas, maybe a new kind of dynamics may emerge. But there could be other issues like, nuclear power, where maybe the global south just wants a seat at the table, like the Security Council. So I think it's not either or, but a mix of both.
Just to follow up to that,
Yeah.
you spoke about the UN Security Council as an example. India has been trying for the longest time to get a seat on that table, but the country opposing it is also a global south country, which is China. So how do we handle those sort of differences?
Well, that's for the big heads in this world to think about, because I think both these countries are now emerging powers, and I think it's not only the countries of the global south which pay tribute to both these countries. Their voices are loud and clear, and I think it's very important to have a balance on all these important fora.
Julia, what do you think about the long-term goal here? Is it a new world order from the ashes of the old one?
We have exactly posed some questions in our survey on that topic, and what we can take from it is that at least in India, Brazil, and South Africa, there's clearly no interest in a revolution, but in reform. Because we have asked, for example, a question on the United Nations Security Council, and respondents have mentioned that they prefer a reform of the council and not a replacement. Also, with regards to IMF, there's interest in reform. Nevertheless, our research also shows that, and I mean that's not news, but still there's some evidence for that countries are very frustrated. So, for example, the United Nations was a kind of the center point for the international order, is seen as not as relevant anymore compared to G20 and, for example, in Brazil, even BRICS. And also when you ask experts about which institution is best equipped to solve global challenges 10 years from now, it's not the UN, it's G20. So I think this kind of reflects the frustration, but still I would say reform, not revolution, is rather what we can take from it.
There seems to be a consensus here on that at least. Now, when we talk about the voice of the global south, the BRICS is a grouping that often comes up a lot. And they started out with just 4 members, now it's grown to 10. So clearly there is interest in the BRICS as an alternative, or at least something that's different from the existing Western order. How does Nepal see the BRICS and its growth over the years? Do you think it's building an effective alternative for the global south?
They have not really, forgive my limited knowledge, but I don't think we have really interacted that much with BRICS, whereas the UN body is a body of which Nepal is a member, and because we are a very small nation, I think there is still something about multilateralism that the UN Charter stresses upon, that countries like Nepal, and yesterday we heard Liechtenstein and other countries also talk about this, that we still subscribe to it. And of course BRICS, if they would reach out to us, I'm sure we would also like to interact with them. But it's not something I've really been studying, so I'm not in a good position to answer that question.
What do you think about the challenge being mounted by the BRICS? Is it a viable one?
Well, being a messenger coming from Europe in that case, I have to admit that many people are concerned about, or were concerned about, the expansion of the BRICS grouping. Even if I think there's consensus on, it's always good when people sit and talk. And this also reflects the BRICS to some extent. However, we have also heard from many different countries, also this morning, for example, from Indonesia, that BRICS is not seen as a substitute or kind of a rival of the G7, and that there are different interests connected with it. So I think this is kind of something that makes Europeans sleep and not concerns them then too much with regards to BRICS. Yeah.
I think perception is also very important here. If I go back a couple of decades, a lot of countries in our part of the world, they were often seen as basket cases or problem countries to be handled by the rest of the world. Now you're seeing every country basically wanting to engage with the global south. When you engage with your colleagues, for example, from the rest of the world, do you see pushback against the global south agenda, or do you think they're more willing to listen to the global south concerns nowadays?
I think they're more willing to listen, and I think it's a good place for the global south to be in. I think the importance, not only the importance, the all the sacrifice and the contribution that the Global South has made to say things like environmental conservation, to mitigation, to adaptation, all these things, plus the preservation of humanity as a whole. This is and the old cultures from where you can learn a lot is something that the Global South has kept very securely and at no extra cost to other people. I think the value of that is being learned and appreciated more. So I don't think there's a pushback.
And the Global South's mission is essentially to reshape or change what's going on in the world right now. But there's one man in the United States who says, don't change anything, we like the way it's going. And that's Donald Trump. And he's engaging with the Global South countries in a very different way. He's using tariffs and sanctions. He wants to retain the existing order. Do you think Trumpism in general is going to affect this Global South movement?
Well, I think it's going to affect how we, especially in Europe, are going to interact with countries from the Global South. Because, as I've mentioned in the beginning, the Global South has re-emerged on our mental map, I would say 3 years ago, specifically with the invasion of Ukraine. And I think that now with Donald Trump, we are even more aware that we are in sincere need of partners who are also interested in multilateralism, in reforming institutions, and not just like dropping out of all the institutions that were built, even if they are not they need reform, that's for sure, and there's agreement on that. But I think he's going to interfere in the way we interact, basically.
Finally, just a word on climate change, which is clearly one of the biggest issues facing the Global South countries. And I believe Nepal is also making initiatives to ensure that all the countries come together and talk about this, talk about the financing that's required for climate change, and also more responsibility and accountability from the rest of the world on this issue.
Yes, we are organizing something called the Sagarmatha Sambad. That's like the Everest Dialogue, and it's the first edition that we are organizing this year from 16th to 18th of May. And I hope you all are also going to be part of it, because we are going to be looking at specifically the mountains and how humanity is living on it, and the high cost that we are bearing for the high cost of climate change. And the bearing is not only for the people living in Nepal. The millions who live in the Indian subcontinent are also affected by the glaciers and the snows of the Himalayas. So it's a very important discussion, and I hope all of you, whoever is here and whoever is going to listen to this, will come to participate in it.
I think going forward, it's quite clear that the Global South is going to be one of the most important players in the world, not just because of the sheer number of people living in the Global South, but also because of how the Global South is engaging with the rest of the world and what our priorities are. So we'll keep this conversation going, and thank you so much to both of you for joining us on the Ideas Pod.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.